For some, that one office on the third floor of Old Main at Geneva College is a riddle wrapped in a mystery inside an enigma. From the eclectic door to the not-so-inviting finger on the wall beckoning visitors inside, the office is starkly out of place in the otherwise drab environment of Geneva's academic buildings, much like its resident scholar. Dr. Paul Wiley Kilpatrick has been a professor of linguistics at Geneva for over 20 years, teaching under the auspices of the school's English department. Even before teaching at the school, however, Kilpatrick was no stranger at Geneva, having attained his undergraduate degree from the institution.
I was a Reformed Presbyterian. My father was a Reformed Presbyterian pastor. My grandfather was a Reformed Presbyterian pastor. My grandfather on my mother's side, so both sides way back. And my oldest brother had come to Geneva and crashed and burned. He didn't get along real well with Geneva, and Geneva didn't get along well with him, and he left after 1 year. And my middle brother got married and stayed in Arizona, and so I was the only last hope. So the pressure was on to come to Geneva, so I came, and I enjoyed my time here. I had 4 good years. It was a real exciting time, the 60s, you know, Vietnam War, civil rights, all that kind of stuff. So, and there were a lot of good professors at Geneva that were encouraging us to think about things like that I had never thought of before, the war and civil rights and poverty and those things had really not been on my radar at all. So I had yeah.
So what was the formative experience that actually kind of turned you into a linguist?
That was right here in Geneva. That was literally 1 floor below where we're sitting right now, in the room just below us, the classroom just below us, and it was Dr. Ann Payton, and it was a grammar's class. It was still called English 382, I think, English grammar. And she was asking about sort of the beginning of the class, literally, the beginning of the semester, and she said, so what do you think I'm the bread of life means? And we talked about that, and we were, I would say maybe a third to a half the class was professing Christians that had been raised in the church and knew that kind of stuff. And then she said, what's it mean? In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God. The Word was God. And, you know, and we sort of thought for a second, and then, you know, somebody in the class said, Jesus. And she said, no, you don't get to go there. You don't get to do that. That's too easy. Why? The Word was God. You can't just sort of jump to Jesus. And I tell people, it was literally at that moment that I became a linguist, because that was the question, and I thought, that's a really good question, and I have no idea, but it's a fascinating one. And so I started thinking about that. Then a friend who had gone to the Summer Institute of Linguistics in the University of Washington came back that summer, that fall, and said, you really need to take this course, because given our conversations, I know what your interests are, you need to do that. So I did, and I loved it, and it, you know, 2 weeks in, and I thought, no, I want to do this for the rest of my life. I want to be a linguist.
So what brought you back as a professor as opposed to being a student?
As a professor, I was... Geneva was making the move to develop their international student program, and they were a couple people knew of me, and then they hired a guy in admissions who, it turns out, I had trained with in Summer Institute of Linguistics in the University of Washington, and they didn't know that. And when he found out, as Bill Gibbs, and when Bill found out that I was one of the people that they were looking at, he sort of said, oh, I know Paul, and da-da-da. And so and I still knew a lot of the people at Geneva, and so they recruited me essentially. They called and said, would you apply? And I did, and they flew me up here, and actually the year before that I had been up here on a sabbatical, and my wife had taught in the humanities program as a part-timer, and so they knew her, and so then when that need came up, they recruited me, and I came up to basically do linguistics and the core stuff, but to build the international, so ESL and international support. Yeah.
Okay. Dr. Kilpatrick still facilitates the ESL program at Geneva, while also teaching several English classes and linguistics courses. His classes are known amongst students for the personality, insight, and experience which Dr. Kilpatrick brings to the table.
Yeah.
So what would you say your philosophy of teaching is?
Yeah, that one I think I can say fairly succinctly, and that's to to introduce young minds, curious minds, to big ideas and then just get out of the way. Because I really try not to have agendas, because I don't know where the students are coming from. One of the things I learned real quickly, and it was both down at Puerto Rico and here, was that the students come from such a wild variety of backgrounds, and you have, like here, there's this sort of sense that most of these students are from evangelical families, and it's all nice and da-da-da, and very quickly I had students writing in their papers about, one of my early students was a cutter, and would come in and talk to me about cutting herself, and just for me to come in and sort of assume that I know what's best for all these students and say, now here's what you need to believe about X. So instead say, look at all these extraordinary ideas. Look at this stuff about quantum. Look at this stuff about just the way the world works. Look at language. Look how language works. It's so reductive to, what's the word, reductionistic, to say, let's talk about can and may. Can means ability, may means permission. Number one, no, it doesn't. And number two, what a boring thing to talk about when you've got all these other extraordinary linguistic things to talk about how we can say I love you or I loathe you, and have these just extraordinary human dynamics based on just a couple of little variations in your tongue, in your mouth, and the way that English means things one way and the way Thai or Zulu or Apache means them in just whole different ways. And so you get into those languages and you see these whole new ways to look at the world.
To look at the world in new ways is one of the many things Dr. Kilpatrick often asks his students to do. His international perspective brings with it a greater appreciation for the diversity of God's kingdom on the earth, one which he has invited students to participate in for years, and which he will surely continue to do for years to come.